A very warm welcome to the second annual Coller-Dolittle Awards for two-way interspecies communication. It is a huge pleasure to be here with such an extraordinary gathering of scientists, researchers, and innovators, all united by a shared ambition to better understand how other species communicate, and of course to explore how we might one day communicate meaningfully in return. My name is Natasha Kaplinsky, and I'm absolutely delighted to be your host alongside Professor Liad Mudrik of the Sagul School of Neuroscience at Tel Aviv University. Liad, I'm full of admiration for the work that you do, and it's an absolute honour to host these awards alongside you. Thank you. Inspired by the spirit of the Turing test, the Coller-Dolittle Challenge calls on the global scientific community to push the boundaries of what we thought possible, developing technologies capable of decoding non-human communication and opening the door to genuinely two-way exchange between species. Established by the Jeremy Coller Foundation in partnership with Tel Aviv University, this pioneering initiative is driven by a bold and a compelling idea that meaningful dialogue with the natural world may be far closer than we once imagined. Now, each year, over the course of 5 years, a prize of $100,000 is going to be awarded to the team demonstrating the most significant advance towards this goal. Now, to be considered, submissions must meet three key criteria. Let me remind you what they are. The first, they must employ a non-invasive approach to either decoding or communicating with non-human animals. Second, they must demonstrate communication across more than one context, such as alarm, mating, or foraging, using the species' own natural signals, ideally in a way that's both interactive and also autonomous. And third, they must provide clear evidence that the signals transmitted elicit measurable and meaningful responses from the animals themselves. Well, tonight we not only celebrate the remarkable progress that has already been made, but also the remarkable possibilities that we hope lie ahead. The work recognised here this evening challenges our assumptions. It expands our understanding of intelligence and communication and brings us closer to answering one of science's most fascinating questions. Can we truly have a conversation with another species?
Thank you, Natasha, and welcome everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you today, and the honor of co-hosting this event with you is mine, Natasha. Before we begin, I'd like to explain briefly how this year's 4 finalists were selected. The evaluation process was conducted in 2 stages. First, all submissions underwent independent review by external experts with relevant scientific and technical expertise, ensuring each entry received rigorous and informed assessment. Those reviews were then carefully considered by our scientific committee, which selected the 4 highest scoring entries to become this year's finalists. Today, we have the privilege of hearing directly from these outstanding teams. Each is advancing the frontiers of research in animal communications, cognition, and the possibility of meaningful interspecies dialogue. We look forward to an afternoon of fascinating ideas, new discoveries, and thought-provoking discussion. Let me outline the program ahead. We'll first begin by meeting our judging panel before hearing from Jeremy Coller, co-creator and patron of this initiative, who will offer some opening reflections. We will then hear presentations from each of our 4 finalists who will share their research, methodologies, and findings. Following the finalist presentations, we are honored to welcome 2 distinguished speakers, Dr. Irene Pepperberg and Professor Ofer Chernichovsky, whose pioneering contributions have helped shape this field and whose perspectives will further enrich today's conversation. While these sessions are taking place, our judges will work hard. They will deliberate over the finalists' presentations and submissions, At the conclusion of today's program, they will announce the winner or winners of the 2026 Coller-Dolittle Challenge. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our judging panel. We are joined today by 7 highly respected experts from across a wide range of disciplines. As I introduce them, I would like to invite each panelist to briefly turn on their camera. First, Dr. Yossi Yovel, Professor of Zoology at Tel Aviv University, co-creator of the Coller-Dolittle Challenge, and spokesperson for the judging panel. Hi, Yossi. Elodie Briffer, ecologist at the University of Copenhagen. Hello. Amir Teicher, Professor of History of Science at Tel Aviv University, joining us now. Jonathan Birch, Director of the Jeremy Coller Center for Animal Sentience at the London School of Economics. Hello. Mariam Knorschild, biologist at Freie Universität Berlin. Raja Jairis, I'm not sure he's with us now, but he's an AI researcher at Tel Aviv University. And last but not least, Arik Kirschenbaum of Girton College from the University of Cambridge. Hello. Hello to all of you. Thank you for joining us and for contributing your expertise, insight, and time to this important endeavor. Please feel free to now turn off your cameras again. We are very grateful for your support and participation, and with that, let's begin.
Liad, thank you. So much to look forward to as this event progresses. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce someone whose vision and commitment have made this initiative possible. Jeremy Coller is founder of the Jeremy Coller Foundation, a philanthropist, business leader, and of course, passionate advocate for advancing our understanding of animals and the natural world. Throughout his work, Jeremy has consistently championed ambitious ideas that challenge conventional thinking and encourage us to reconsider humanity's relationship with other species. The Coller-Dolittle Challenge is a powerful expression of that vision by bringing together expertise from fields as diverse as artificial intelligence, neuroscience, and animal behaviour. This initiative is pushing the very boundaries of scientific discovery, whilst also opening entirely new ways of thinking about communication, intelligence, consciousness, and empathy beyond our own species. Jeremy's commitment to these questions extends far beyond this challenge. Throughout his support for pioneering research, programs, and institutions, including the Jeremy Coller Centre for Animal Sentience at the London School of Economics, he's helped place the study of animal minds, welfare, and sentience firmly on the global research agenda. But what makes this challenge particularly remarkable is the idea that, as its very heart, through curiosity, through collaboration, and scientific rigour, we may be able to bridge one of the most profound gaps in our understanding, the divide between humans and the rest of the animal kingdom. It's an ambitious vision, an inspiring one at that, and as the work that we'll see today demonstrates, a vision that is already generating extraordinary advances in research and discovery. Jeremy, thank you for your leadership and for your generosity. Over to you.
Jeremy, can you hear us?
While Jeremy finds his camera, we're giving Jeremy Coller an enormous welcome and huge gratitude for everything that he's done to set up this prize.
And maybe while we are waiting for Jeremy to join us, we can again come back to what we are planning to do after we hear from Jeremy. We will hear from each one of the finalists to get a better understanding of their research, of what they are proposing to do and what they have already done. And then that's also a good opportunity for you, the audience who are with us, you will be able to ask questions. So in the Q&A, you can write down your questions and we will present them to the finalists in order to allow some interaction. Of course, it will be relatively short, but hopefully that would be a good way to better understand the ideas that are now being proposed.
Oh, hold on, it's all complicated, but thank you, Natasha, for those ridiculously warm words. I just got lost somewhere. Hold on. If I could say thank you, Natasha, and hi, everyone. Sorry for that technical hurdle. Just to remind everyone that it's 100,000 progress award, but there's a grand prize of $10 million for when we actually crack it, and when we find the right test and we find the right answers. They said the world was flat. Galileo was a heretic for saying the Earth orbited the sun. Top geologists dismissed the theory of continental drift as utter damned rot. And as far as I can see, every leap forward in human history, in our knowledge and our understanding of the world, has begun with someone questioning what everyone knew to be true. Passionately curious individuals resisting the tyranny of conventional wisdom and daring to look at things from a splendidly unreasonable perspective. And that's what this prize, this ultimate $10 million prize, is all about. Using AI, the latest technology and cutting edge thinking, to explore the unknown, answer questions that haven't been asked, and ultimately crack the code of interspecies communication. We share this planet with trillions of other animals. Yet as a species, we've only ever been interested, it seems to me, in what other humans have to say. And as Polynesia the parrot complains in the original Dr. Dolittle, the only thing in animal language that people have learned to understand is that when a dog wags his tail, he means, woof, I'm glad. We can do so much better. And the projects we're learning about through the Coller-Dolittle Prize this year, last year, entrants, finalists, winners, they fill me with optimism because they show that better is within reach, that it's just around the corner. If we want to hear, all we have to do is listen. And that's exactly what these finalists are doing. From primates to rodents, from jungles to deserts, down on the ground, up in the sky, they are striving to understand, to interpret, and to communicate. It's just truly inspiring stuff. And while the ultimate goal of achieving genuine two-way communication remains tantalizingly out of reach, the teams we'll be hearing from today are bringing us all one step closer to what I'm convinced is now inevitable. It's inevitable, because AI is accelerating so fast. I have absolute conviction we'll crack the code by 2030, a breakthrough that will benefit humans and our fellow animals the world over. Thank you, Yossi, our chair, the distinguished panel of judges, and all the people behind the scenes who've made this event and this prize happen. Thank you to all the researchers and scientists who submitted entries and our finalists who are joining us today. But above all, thank you to all the other animals out there who've waited so long for us to get around to listening and finally providing a voice for the voiceless. Back to you, Natasha.
Seems like Natasha might be experiencing a bit of a problem with the connection. Natasha, are you with us? So if not, I'll cover for her in the meantime, and then when she joins us, we can reconvene with her. So Jeremy, thank you for those thoughtful and inspiring words. The Coller-Dolittle challenge exists because of a willingness to pursue bold questions, questions that sit at the edge of what we currently know and challenge us to imagine what may yet be possible. Your vision, Jeremy, and leadership have played a pivotal role in bringing that ambition to life. The work we will hear about this afternoon demonstrates not only remarkable scientific ingenuity, but also the power of collaboration across disciplines in tackling some of the most fascinating questions of our time. Jeremy, thank you once again for your commitment, your generosity, and your continued support of this important endeavor. We now come to one of the most exciting parts of today's program, hearing directly from our 4 finalist teams. Each of these finalists brings a distinctive perspective to the study of interspecies communication. And hopefully now we can also see these 4 finalists, the 4 teams, and also the plan of what we are planning to do today. Together, these finalists represent an extraordinary range of scientific approaches. Their research spans a remarkable diversity of species, from primates and birds to rodents, as you can see here, and explores fundamental questions about how communication systems emerge, how they operate in natural environments, and how advances in science and technology may help us engage with them in new and meaningful ways. What unites these projects is not only scientific excellence, but a shared ambition to expand the boundaries of our understanding and move us closer to genuine interspecies communication. We are delighted to have the opportunity to hear from them today, and we look forward to learning more about their research, their discoveries, and the ideas that have brought them to this stage of the competition. Natasha, are you back with us? Maybe still not. So I'll continue. And again, when you join Natasha, it would be great to hear back from you. So as we said before, we will take questions from the audience. So please type your questions into the Q&A box that you'll find in the ribbon at the bottom of your screen. And now allow me to introduce Dr. Julia Lee from the University of California, Berkeley, who will talk about her pioneering research, Cracking the Language of Zebra Finches, a journey into their mental life.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this nice introduction. This competition is a fantastic way to valorize our work as researchers and give us the opportunity to share our work. So thank you. So let me also thank and acknowledge the work of people who contributed to that project over the years. Aude and Ben were both undergraduate students who performed behavioral experiments at different times. Logan helped with data analysis as PhD candidate in the lab. And finally, Frederick, who's professor at UC Berkeley, and also my partner in crime, who really believed in that crazy idea from the beginning. Next. So my name is Julia Lee, and I'm a computational neuroscientist at the University of California in Berkeley, studying animal vocal communication. Zebra finches became my pet model species as I started my PhD in France with Professor Mattevon and Professor Vignon. I was then focusing on the vocal and social behaviors associated with pair bonding and had the chance to observe and study them in their natural Australian land. By the end of my PhD, I really nourished the idea of truly decoding the language of zebra finches and embarked on that adventure when I joined the team of Professor Tennyson in California, Berkeley. I started this project in 2011, and today I am presenting years of research on the zebra finch that I believe are a milestone to achieve the goal of interspecies communication. Next. Zebra finches are a great species to investigate animal communication because they are very chatty, both in the field and in captivity. And I hope you heard this, but my first question I asked myself when hearing these chatty songbirds was, what are they saying? Next. To decode zebra finch vocalizations, I combined multiple approaches. As an ethologist, I observed and recorded the vocalizations of freely interacting birds, classifying calls according to who was producing them and what was the exact context. As a computational scientist, I applied machine learning and bioacoustical analysis to identify what and how information is coded in the acoustics of vocalizations. And as an experimentalist, I designed an operant task to put our results to the test and ask birds if they agreed with our human classification of their bird language. And I will show you that this last approach led us to an unexpected discovery. Clues that the brefinches have a mental representation of the meaning of their vocalizations. Next. When I started to recognize and classify calls according to context, I was fortunate to follow the steps of the famous field researcher Richard Zahn, who had carefully described the zebrafinch call types he had found in the wild. After countless observations of birds in captivity and validation of my observations in the field, I realized by the end of my PhD that I could also tell apart their call types. Next. The zebrafinch repertoire counts 11 call types that we call ethogram-based because we decided of this classification based on ethological observations of the context of production. You are looking at a UMAP projections of all the vocalizations I gathered and annotated in a unique library of more than 3,000 sound clips. For each call type, I plotted an example spectrogram so you can appreciate the diversity of sounds these birds produce. This library recorded in captivity has been key to explore the information content of vocalizations and query the birds for their understanding of their own species vocalizations. Next. Applying machine learning techniques and bioacoustical analysis to this library, we first demonstrated that our call type labeling of vocalizations constituted distinct acoustic groups of sounds. Many combinations of acoustic features and algorithms can be explored, but they all told us the same story. Here is the example of linear discriminant analysis applied to the spectrogram of vocalizations. What you're looking at is a confusion matrix, where color-coded is a probability of the algorithm predicting that, let's say, begging call is a begging call or any other call types. Our analysis did not, as you can tell, from the white diagonal in this matrix, the algorithm pretty much agree with the human classification. And our analysis did not only reveal how well call types were distinct, but also identify the acoustic features that are used to code this information. I am showing here the idiosyncratic spectral shapes of call types as example. This opens the possibility to artificially generating these sounds for communicating with the species. But a key step to that endeavor is to validate with birds if we correctly identify the words or call types in their bird language. To this end, I developed an operant task to query the birds about their own classification of their vocalizations. Next. The principle of this task is very similar to how we humans scroll through videos until we find something interesting or rewarding and watch it fully. Here, birds trigger the playbacks of vocalizations by activating a sensor, and we can set that only specific vocalizations be rewarded by some seeds. The trick is that the probability of playing a playback that is rewarded by seeds is lower than that of non-rewarded vocalizations. Next. Birds then quickly learn to skip or interrupt the vocalizations that are non-rewarded, demonstrating their ability to discriminate between the two groups of stimuli. I need to emphasize here that the number of stimuli is very large in each set, so that throughout the day, the same stimulus is rarely played more than twice, which forced the bird to generalize instead of just relying on memory. Next. Using this design, we asked birds if they could discriminate each call type from the rest of the repertoire, randomly sampling from a large database of vocalizations. Each day, our birds had to find out which call type was rewarded and selectively interrupt all the other ones to optimize their feeding time. Here is a female performing on the discrimination of the call type song. She's interrupting all the first sounds. She recognized I'm not being, and then she holds on. She knows that the reward for that day, and she goes to get her reward. Next. Birds were very good at this task. Every day the rule was changing and we could test all the human-made classes or orthogram-based call types. Here is the average discrimination performance of that same bird across all call types. And these are the performance of all 12 subject birds, clearly demonstrating that zebrafinches could do this discrimination very easily, which validates the orthogram-based call types as an organization of the vocal repertoire that zebrafinches agree with. But beyond that, an unexpected discovery we made is that their responses indicated they have a mental imagery of the meaning of their vocalizations. In other words, that they understand the meaning of their call types. Next. So what do I mean by mental imagery? Let's say I ask you to group in the acoustic space 4 words: glove, love, hurt, and heart. You would probably come up with grouping glove and love together and hurt and heart further away. But if I then ask you to group these words in a semantic space, you would probably bring closer love and heart, placing glove and hurt further away. Next. The repertoire of the zebrafinch can be hierarchically organized into semantic hypercategories that group together call types that share similar meaning, such as the different contact calls or the different alarm calls. So we wondered if zebrafinches would perceive as more similar call types that share similar meaning, irrespective of how acoustically similar they sound. To investigate that question, we compared birds' systematic errors in the operant discrimination task to the systematic errors of an algorithm trained only on the acoustic features and agnostic to call type meaning. Next. These systematic errors can be represented as distances between call types. And here are the acoustic map and the perceptual maps obtained respectively from the algorithm errors on the left and the bird's behavioral errors on the right. What we discovered is that call type belonging to the same semantic hypercategory were 3 times more clustered in the perceptual space of birds than the acoustic space. We call this clustering the semantic magnet effect. Next. The simple explanation of that effect is that when hearing a vocalization, birds have a mental representation of the meaning of the call, which is influencing the classification responses in the operant task beyond the acoustic similarity of the vocalization to the rewarded call type. Next. So how close are we, from interspecies communication with zebrafinches, and what are the next steps? So I've shown you that through careful ethological observations and audio recordings, and after asking the birds themselves, we have obtained a species-validated dictionary of the call types or words in the zebrafinch language. I think that's a major milestone to the objective of communication. We were also able to obtain a form of communication with the birds, indirectly getting answers to our questions about their language. The fact that zebrafinches did not systematically respond to playback of vocalizations with the typical response they would show in a natural group setting, such as hiding for alarm calls or calling back for contact calls, also demonstrate that they are capable of non-reflexive vocal interactions. The responses showed us that they understand the meaning of their call types. From there, I believe that the next steps are first to understand the rules of dynamical vocal exchanges, which is really how fast to respond and with what call type. And finally, to design bird robots that we would control to achieve a multimodal communication with zebrafinches. And efforts in that direction started. So we're definitely getting into an exciting moment. I would say let's get, RoboFinch to not only sing randomly, but to also contingently produce all the call types. I think, thank you for, your attention. There you go. The slides are coming up a little bit slower than I was expecting. I think lagged, but that's okay.
Julieli, thank you very much for this fascinating presentation and beautiful research. We will wait if there are questions from the audience. This is the time to type them. But in the meantime, I have also a couple of questions for you. So I wonder, do you know if this is species specific? That is, do we know that this is something that is unique to communication, or will these birds be able to do the same for other vocalizations by other animals, for example?
Right. I believe this is unique to the species words or like call types, really. Then, I don't, they might be able to learn from other species, but that might be, the zebrafinch might not be the best species where we would see this. I think there are other examples of other species that could be a little bit smarter than the zebrafinch and that are able to infer the meaning of other species vocalizations. I mean, look at us, for instance, right? What we're doing, right? So, but there's a spectrum here.
Right, but this has yet to be tested, if I understand correctly. And joining us is also Yossi Yovel. Hi, Yossi.
Hi, Julie. Great talk.
Hello, Yossi.
Two of the talks we're going to hear today are going to deal with compositionality. So I was wondering if we know something about compositionality in zebra finches.
That's a great question. I think compositionality is something that has not been studied yet in zebrafinches. mostly by lack of, getting into it. By observations, it doesn't seem obvious that there is compositionality, but I think we need to look more into it because there are some sequences of soft calls that they do produce, and there seem to be some rules, but that's one of my next questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one question from Jonathan Birch.
Yes, thanks very much, Julie. So you talked about these 11 core types. Do you feel as though that's just scratching the surface? Like, is it just the tip of the iceberg of the true language of these birds, or is it really you think that's all there is there?
I think this is scratching the iceberg of like what are the core words in their language. There are definitely, I think, some variability in those words that I did not capture yet, and we need to study that more. And also in terms of the dynamic of vocal exchanges, knowing, what you should respond and maybe compositionality, that's something we need to study further.
Thank you so much, both Jonathan and to you, Julie Ellie, for this, Dr. Ellie, I should say, for this beautiful presentation. Thank you so much. And now it's time for our second finalist, Dr. Catherine Crockford and Dr. Roman Wittig from the CNRS Institute for Cognitive Science in Lyon, a Thai chimpanzee project, Ivory Coast. Dr. Crockford will present their research, Cracking the Chimpanzee Code. Over to you. Catherine, are you with us? So we are again experiencing some difficulties with the connection, but hopefully soon enough we will hear from Dr. Crockford about...
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you for joining us, and your slides are already prepared, as you can see. Feel free to take it away.
So first of all, I'd very much like to thank the Jeremy Coller Foundation for shortlisting us for the Doolittle Prize, and I would also like to thank our generous and genius collaborators for all of their work that they've done with us together. For some, okay, here we are. Here are the collaborators. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay in the slides. So what we're interested in is this. That humans hurt animals and destroy biodiversity. Can understanding animals, and as Jeremy said, literally giving animals a voice, help us slow this process? Sorry, again, I'm having problems with the slides moving forward. Oh, good. Okay, got some progress here. Yes. So yeah, we're wondering, if we can understand animals, can they help us slow this process? Humans are actually fascinated by animal communication, and we can have profound moments of connection when we feel like there's mutual understanding. So we're wondering what we can get at here. So there is now rapid progress in being able to understand animal communication, and this is what we want to get at, especially where there might be the most interesting conversation, which could be with our clever cousins, the chimpanzees. So our focus is in understanding chimpanzee communication, their natural communication. We do this through 2 of 3 steps that I'll focus on here. Today, the third step, which is also important, is in our application. So understanding meaning of single calls is the first step. The second step is how call combinations can expand meanings. And the third one that we won't have time for here is working with large data sets to look at the whole repertoire using AI, but that's in our application. So with steps 1 and 2, we address the criteria for the Doolittle Challenge. We strictly use non-invasive approaches to look at natural communication using interactive paradigms with measurable responses across more than one context. We do this in our field site, mainly in the Thai forest and Ivory Coast. We use focal animal sampling and audio record vocalizations, and us, together with others, have demonstrated that call meaning in chimpanzees is mainly about what the signaler is doing whilst vocalizing, their activity like rest and travel, social interaction like greet and groom, and looking at a threat like a snake. So there are at least these 12 contexts here on the board that we have demonstrated are extremely context specific, making chimpanzees probably the most semantically rich animal vocal repertoire to date. So in our first step, understanding playback experiments, we can use these to demonstrate call meaning and elicit vocal replies. In this particular paradigm, a chimpanzee hears either a rest to or an alert to from a hidden speaker, and then he sees a snake model. The rest to indicates that the simulated chimpanzee is ignorant, and then the results actually confirmed our predictions by showing that chimpanzees can actually track other animals' ignorance. So, for example, here in the rest to condition, they provided more alert tos and looked more to the speaker than in the alert to condition. And this gives two takeaways: that subjects extract very different meanings from acoustically similar calls, and that they tailor their vocal replies to others' vocalizations. Is this the start of conversations? And here's a video. Turn up your volumes because the important part is quiet. This chimpanzee is going to hear a rest to from a hidden speaker. Now he's going to move forward and see the snake model and give an alert to as a reply.
Whose? Looks to speaker whose.
Now, hopefully that ran smoothly for you. It's a little jumpy for me, but you hopefully could see that he gave an alert to in reply to the rest to the speaker. So chimpanzees have semantically rich intentional exchanges as well. So now we want to know about the combinations. First, we look at the structure of combinations with short utterances of two call types together. In this plot, each circle is a call type, and the arrows show where calls are combined together in utterance with less than 1 second pause between them. You can see there are a lot of combinations. It's a very flexible system, very surprisingly so. Each third utterance is a call combination. They're common across daily life. They are rule-based and ordered, and so far we've been able to demonstrate social learned ordering of one of these. Comparing this to a forest mangabey and other African monkeys, it's very different. There is much less flexibility in their composite, in their ability to combine. So chimpanzees stand out as a flexible vocal system. But do these combinations change meaning? And here what we find is that there is compositional-like structures that call combinations change the meaning of the composing calls in all 4 ways so far demonstrated in animals. So, for example, call combinations modified, added, or generated new meaning, or changed the order with the meaning. And single calls, when they're combined, they can be combined in more than one combination, in more than one context, with more than one mechanism, so that a who call can combine with a pant call to generate new meaning, or combine with a grunt call to add meaning together. And I'll show you this in 3 videos in a minute. But here, what we have discovered is a highly combinatorial communicator. So in this example of new meaning generation, we show that who calls produced singly occur in 3 contexts: feed, rest, and travel. And pant calls are produced in 3 completely different contexts of affiliate, approach, and play. And when these who and pant calls are combined together, again, they occur in a completely different context of nesting. So now I'll play you a video of a who call, a chimpanzee resting, producing a rest who in reply to a friend's bark. And here, a pant vocalization is produced in approach and affiliate contexts. So you'll see an infant and then a mother approaching a male friend. Infant panting, mother, and affiliation with the baby at the end. And now when these two calls are combined together, they're going to be produced in a completely different context of night nesting. And here you see an adult male building his night nest. Again, turn up your volumes because this is quiet. And now you should hear the combination. So to sum up, we've demonstrated that single calls are context-specific with intentional capacities, and armed with this information, we could then show that call combinations are rule-based and compositional-like. So we've demonstrated that chimpanzees are extraordinarily sophisticated combinatorial communicators. And to address the Doolittle challenge, yes, my favorite books when I was a child actually were Hugh Lofting's books. And yes, moving towards two-way interspecies communication is in progress, and we're making great progress. So when we think about human conversation, it is rewarding, some people suggest, not because we can discuss Shakespeare and politics, but because conversation addresses three fundamental capacities: informing, bonding, and coordinating joint activity. And chimpanzees, we argue, use communication also for these three functions. So chimpanzee utterances and their exchanges are common, semantically rich, and we are close to, or beginning, it's a very ambitious, but I think we're in a place where we can start to look at chimpanzee conversation and decode it. Nonetheless, when people ask, but how interesting is animal conversation going to be? I think this is the wrong question. We want to be asking, how rewarding is it to understand animals and their conversations? Whatever the species, two-way communication offers us powerful moments of connection. And it is this that we want to catalyze with our work to reconnect people with nature. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Crockford, for this beautiful presentation and for the inspiring words. When I was hearing your talk, I was wondering about syntax, because syntax is often mentioned as the most sublime lingual ability that some claim only humans possess. Given the combinatorial aspects that you found, do you think we can talk about syntax also in chimpanzees?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question. I think that we don't know yet. So far we've only looked at, and basically across any other animal, at two-unit utterances, at utterances with two call types. So it's very hard to look at syntax, which means that we're talking about hierarchically structured utterances. So we need to be looking at longer utterances before we can really address that question.
Thank you. And I see that Elodie has a question.
Yes, hi. Yeah, thanks a lot for the very nice talk. It's very interesting that you have so many calls that are extremely context specific, and I was wondering if there is any other calls that are also less context specific, like we find in other species. For example, contact calls are often produced across a whole range of contexts. Do you also have some of these types of calls?
Well, we do find the long distance calls much more baffling. So lots of people have tried to study the pantoot sequence, which is a sequence of whoos and screams and sometimes other vocalizations. And I think one reason it's very hard to study this is because they're produced over 200 or 300 or 400 meters or more. So it's very hard to be with the signaler and the receiver at the same time to know what the response is of the receiver or who is signaling and why they're signaling. So this is a challenge that we still have to meet.
Thank you so much. And we'll take one final question from Amir.
Hi, thank you very much. Can you say something about the differences between individual chimpanzees and their ability to apply these complex compositional language skills? Is there a difference between ages, young and old, male and female, or any other categories?
Yes, thank you for that question. So we have looked at the development of these utterances because they actually have 400 different combinations. So one can start to think, is it really possible that infants have 400 sequences, which is what one would expect if this is an innate inherited system, which is what we've been led to believe for the last 100 years. And actually, what we find is that infants produce very short utterances, and those expand over the first decade of life until that they have an utterance diversity and utterance length that's much more like an adult.
Thank you so much, both Amir and to you, Catherine Crockford, Dr. Crockford, for this talk. And this is also a good opportunity to remind our audience, if you have questions for our speakers, please feel free to write them in the Q&A chat. And I hear good news that Natasha has been able to rejoin us. Natasha, are you with us?
I certainly am, and I have been, and technology has not entirely failed. So thank you very much indeed to Catherine, and thank you, Liad, for covering for me. And thank you also for all those fascinating questions posed by the audience, such poignant questions. So please do continue to engage via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. It's brilliant to have so much contribution and to take the conversation forward. So let's now welcome our third finalist, Professor Nicolas Mathevon, University of Saint-Étienne and École Pratique des Hautes Études, PSL, who is going to showcase his research. Ultrasonic signals support a large-scale communication landscape in wild mice. Truly interesting stuff. Professor Mathevon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Oh, sorry. So hello, everybody. Let's dive together into the ultrasound world of the African striped mouse on our way to interspecies understanding. Any animal communication involves an emitter, a receiver, and a code shared between them. Two-way communication between our species and animals means humans and animals sharing that same code. It's a huge challenge because every species lives in its own sensory world with its own language. My talk today is about how technology is starting to open that door. This sound is the whiz honk of a male hippo emitted from a loudspeaker. This big male is very angry with the signal we played. Playback is one of the most powerful tools we have to interact with animals and to begin to understand what they say. At my lab at the University of Saint-Étienne in France, we've been talking to animals for 30 years. It started with simple tools, a hide, a microphone, a loudspeaker. With those, we showed that black-headed girl chicks recognize the calls of their parents, that fur-seal pups learn their mother's voice in just a few days, that zebra finches change how they respond to a partner depending on who is listening, that mother crocodiles react to the calls of their hatching newborns. Then came signal modification. We altered the rhythm and pitch of elephant seal calls and proved that males identify rivals by voice. And more recently, full synthesis. Artificial calls where we control every acoustic feature. With synthetic puppy whines, we showed a mother dog can simultaneously read who the puppy is and how distressed it is. Each step forward came with new technology. And now we are entering the big data and AI revolution. The old limits, how many calls we could record, how many we could analyze, are gone. Studying complex communication networks with many individuals interacting over the long term is finally possible. Let's talk with the mice. The African striped mouse lives in family groups of up to 30 individuals. It's a cooperative breeder. Parents and older siblings raise the newborns together. We study them in the lab, but mostly in the wild, in the dry Karoo semi-desert of South Africa. Each family defends its territory. They have a nest bush for the night, and they forage in bushes on their territory during the day. They don't like their neighbors. The between territory bushes are the most contested, and everybody is extremely talkative. Everybody is very talkative, but the mouse use ultrasound to communicate. very, very high-pitched sounds that the human ear cannot hear. Let's decrease the pitch and enter their world. It's great to hear the mice, isn't it? With the goal to understand what they say, Florence Leverreau, me, and PhD student Léo Perrier started to study their acoustic communication a few years ago. We are collaborating with Carsten Schradin, who has been studied the behavioral ecology of the striped mouse since decades and runs the South Karoo Research Station in South Africa. The place to be if you want to talk with the African striped mice. We deployed passive acoustic monitoring and collected more than 120,000 calls. Neural networks classified each call type because the striped mouse has a rich vocal repertoire, and we mapped where and when every call was produced. Here's the surprise. The mice use different calls depending on where they are, and therefore with whom they are interacting. Dense conversations in the nest bush when the family is together, flat or slowly modulated whistles in foraging bushes inside the territory, and at the border, where they risk meeting a neighbor, they switch to the down call, a vocalization tied to aggression. We then recorded 18,000 calls in front of specific nests and analyzed them with neural networks pre-trained on rodent vocalizations. A classifier trained on nest identity reveals something striking. Each family group has its own vocal signature. The shape of the frequency modulation is the key. Mice signal which family they belong to. Neural networks and classifiers tell us what we can decode. But one question remains. Do the mice actually use this information? For that, playback is still the gold standard. In this experiment, the loudspeaker emits the call of a stranger. The instant the mouse hears it, it flees into the bush. Here, the same setup, but with the voice of a known neighbor. The mouse stays calm. It turns toward the loudspeaker, alert but not afraid, as if to say, I know this one, but what is it doing here at my nest? The mice are reading the signature. They act on it. Since then, the team has gone further. We know now mice vocalizations carry sex and individual identity. With dedicated time series analyses combined to field playback experiments, PhD student Aglaé also demonstrated that mice combine calls into structured series, and these series are not random. Aglaé's playback experiments in the field show that mice pay attention to the syntax and the rhythm of the sequence. Not just what is said, but how it is arranged. And here's something fascinating. On the left, the acoustic space of trill calls, colored by the social context in which they were recorded. Yellow for aggression, pink for courtship. Acoustically, very different trills can occur in the same context. On the right, the same space, colored by how females actually respond to the calls in playback. The response intensity matches the context, not the acoustics. The mice are not categorizing by sound, they are categorizing by meaning. This winter, during her 3 months in the field, PhD student Aude deployed an acoustic antenna, an array of ultrasound microphones that localizes which mouse is calling. Here, the green dots are for mouse A, the gray dots for mouse B. For the first time, we know who is saying what in the wild. We have access to mouse conversations. The next step is to join them. The future is here. We now possess the technology to analyze behavior and vocalizations in real time, from the individual level to the entire social network. By using the vocal signatures coded in the calls and the dynamic information within their sequences, we are ready to deploy interactive playbacks, establishing a direct channel where mice and computers can finally exchange information. In bioacoustics, every leap in understanding has come with a leap in technology, because we are trying to enter worlds that are not ours. The striped mouse, with its rich social life and its ultrasound voice, may be one of our best chances yet at thinking like a mouse and talking like a mouse. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this fascinating journey into the future of animal communications and mice communication. I want to ask something that ties this talk also with the previous one, where we saw a dissociation between the acoustics and the meaning or the semantics. And here there is an assumption that the way the sounds are organized are also the way they are perceived by the animal. But we know from humans that sometimes there is a dissociation, right? So due to synaptic pruning, we lose our sensitivity to sounds that are sometimes acoustically very different, but because we haven't been exposed to them, they sound the same to us. Is there any way for us to know how it sounds like for the mouse?
That's an interesting question, but you know this ability relies mainly on learning and exposure.
Correct.
So this is a huge field that we have just started to investigate with the mouse is actually do they learn something? Are they able first to shape their vocalizations depending on their experience, and then are they able to shape their auditory abilities depending on the experience? So I'm sure, you know, we used to underestimate the animals. That's very common posture of the human beings. And so I wouldn't be surprised that we will discover in a very short time that those mice, they are able indeed to do this kind of thing.
And going back to the question of syntax, because you also alluded to that, how complex is the syntax that you find for mice?
Oh, so this is something we also are currently investigating. Actually, what we know is that those mice, they emit most of the time they emit their calls in series of calls, of dozens of calls, and I mean those calls, they are ordered. They are not emitted at random. And what we found through playback experiments in the field is that this order is very important for the mice. As soon as you change this the order between the calls, then you disrupt or you impair the way the mice understand the information.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Natasha. If we are able to, here we can. We are.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Here I am. Leah, thank you very much. And Professor Mathivon, absolutely fascinating stuff there. Thank you. Time now for our last, but certainly not least finalist, Dr. Melissa Berthet from University of Zurich, presenting extensive compositionality in the vocal system of bonobos. Please tell us a little bit more about your fascinating research. Over to you, Melissa.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm very honored to be here. Today I'm going to present you the work I conducted during my former postdoc at the University of Zurich. So already in the time of Aristotle and Plato, about 2000 years ago, humans were very intrigued by animal communication. What do they communicate about? What are the differences between animal communication and human language? And can we communicate with animals? And today, about 2000 years later, we're still not completely sure how to answer those questions. Yet, having a deep understanding of animal communication and maybe even being able to communicate with them would allow us to understand how they perceive the world, how they reason, and that would have many applications like better protecting wildlife or improving the welfare of captive or domesticated animals. However, today we're still far from achieving two-way communication. The steps to achieve two-way communication are first to establish the repertoire of signals, basically describe the vocalization, the gestures, and so on. The next step is to understand the meaning of those signals, whether they're emitted in isolation or in combination. And the last step is to broadcast the signals, and then if the animals answer, we can use the step 2 to decode what they're communicating, and then we can enter a kind of a loop that would basically allow us to have a conversation with the animals. However, today, we're quite stuck, especially at step 2. We still don't completely understand the meaning of animal signals. Why is it? Why is it so hard? Understanding the meaning of animal signals implies understanding what is happening when the signal is produced. And it's been since the 80s that we are extensively
investigating the meaning of animal signals, and yet we still don't understand all the subtleties, and I think it comes from methodological issues. The first limitation is that when we investigate the meaning of animal signals, we use very broad description of the context. So for example, if you want to investigate this signal, the whine in dogs, that may mean do this with me, but you only consider very large contexts like feeding, playing, resting, you will really have troubles to understand what this signal means. And you might just conclude that it's a very ambiguous signal that is used in a lot of different contexts. Another limitation is that we mostly focus on a few salient signals. So typically the signals that are emitted during a food context or alarm context. And while they give a good glimpse of the communication of animals, it's not enough to really understand what they communicate about and how they perceive the world. So we developed a new approach that overcome this limitation with several innovations. The first innovation is that we use a holistic description of the context. So when a call is emitted, we look at the behavior of the signaler, the behavior of the recipient, and also external events. And this allows us to really have a complete description of the signals. The second innovation, The second innovation is that we study the signals at the repertoire level. We look at all the signals and the combination, and this allows us to have a better idea of what animal communicates about in general. And we consider that the meaning of a signal is the contextual features that are present more than you would expect by chance when the signal is emitted. So here we thought that the critical step was really to test this method on a species that is very challenging to study and for which we have very little understanding of their communication. So for this, we worked with bonobos. So bonobos are our closest living relatives. They're critically endangered and they live in the heart of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And so it's been decades that their communication is studied, but so far researchers were really struggling to understand what they were communicating about because they live in very remote environments, because they live in very complex societies, and they use their code in very flexible ways, so they can use their code in a lot of different contexts. So I spent 8 months at the Coller-Dolittle Bonobo Research Project studying 3 communities of wild bonobos where I could collect the largest data sets on bonobo vocalizations to date. Typically, I would record single calls and combination of 2 calls. And whenever a call was emitted, I would follow the individual who emitted this vocalization for 2 minutes, and I would describe the context using 336 descriptors. Basically, it means that for every vocalization that I recorded, I then answered 336 questions to describe the context as best as I could and really have an idea of what is happening when this call is emitted. Those questions could be, for example, is the caller walking? Yes or no? Is the caller approaching another individual? Yes or no? And so on. And then later, we were able to associate which set of contextual features were associated with each vocalization. And basically, this allowed us, through these correlations, to establish for each call type of bonobo a meaning. So this allowed us to build a kind of a dictionary. And here I want to attract your attention to 2 interesting results. The first one is if we look at the peep and the yelp, from a human point of view, it may seem like they just are requests. However, the peep is a soft request. It's something like, I really would like that we do this, but if you don't want, it's fine. And the yelp, on the other hand, is a very strong request. Let's do this, and the others have to comply. Here, I think it's very interesting because this method is very powerful in highlighting those sorts of differences in meaning, which could not have been possible with other methodologies. And the second result I want to mention is that if you look at this dictionary, you see that most of the communication of bonobos is about coordinating activities. And this is very important because it shows us that what matters for bonobos is coordinating the activities in the group, which makes sense for a very social and very cooperative species. So we have established this dictionary, but like I said, bonobos also combine calls. And so we were interested in whether those combinations resemble human sentences. And human sentences rely on compositionality, which is basically the fact that the meaning of the sentence is derived from the meaning of the elements. So, for example, the meaning of strawberry cake is derived from the meaning of strawberry and the meaning of cake. And so we used a previously established multi-step linguistic approach that allowed us to see whether in bonobos, some combination had a meaning that was derived from that of their elements. So basically, whether bonobos also had combinations that looked like human sentences. And this method allowed us to find 4 combinations in their repertoire. For example, they can combine the high hoot, a kind of pay attention to me call, with the low hoot when they're excited. And they combine these 2 calls when they request help, when they're being aggressive, for example, and they want someone in the audience to come and help them. They can also combine the yelp, let's do this, with the grunt, look at me. Something like, let's do what I'm doing. So look at me, do what I'm doing. And it's something that they use when it's time to build a night nest. So everybody has to come to the same place and build a night nest together so that nobody is lost in the forest at night. They can combine the peep, I would like to, and the whistle, let's stay together, when there is some rising tension in the group and they want to make peace with the other ones. And finally, they can combine the peep yelp, which is a join initiation, with the high hoot, pay attention to me, and they combine those 2 when they want to travel together. And here, what is very interesting is that if you look on the left, all the call types are green, meaning that all the call types of bonobos can be found in at least one compositional structure. And this is very similar to humans, where all the words that we use can be used in sentences. So here, bonobos really rely on compositionality and combinations in general to extend the number of things they can communicate about. So we have seen that for 2,000 years, people were very interested in achieving 2-way communication, but they were stuck at the stage of understanding the meaning of signals. But now we are at a tipping point, because with this method that we can apply on any species and any communication system, we can maybe finally move forward and achieve 2-way communication. And so the next frontier would be to broadcast those signals using this approach and finally being able to understand how animals perceive the world and what matters to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, and it's clear that it demanded a huge amount of work in order to be able to create this dictionary. I see we have questions from the judges, so maybe I'll wait with my own question and start with that of Elodie.
I think Yossi was first.
Yossi, do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, okay. I agree. A lot of very hard work and very exciting, because we knew so little about bonobos. Is there any way to test what you found, whether it's the individual vocalizations or the compositionality? How can we examine that this is indeed relevant and important for the animals?
Mm-hmm. So I think the first thing that would come to mind is to run playbacks, which we haven't done so far because logistically it's very demanding, but it's something that we want to do in the future. So the idea would be to playbacks combinations, see how they react and whether that correspond with what we observed in the wild.
But if I can maybe follow up on that, like, is there a way to make sure, because it seems as if there is some interpretation involved here. At the end of the day, you're moving from those 336 questions into a psychological description. Is there any way to minimize that subjectivity or to validate the labels?
Yeah. So this is actually very interesting because it's a method that is used actually in linguistics. So if you look at the work of linguists who work on the data on primates, for example, Philipp Schlenker, who I have worked with, it's exactly what they do. They take those very pure contextual features, but then of course you need a bit of interpretation to see, for example, okay, it seems that this call, every time it's emitted, everybody joins, for example. So you have a lot of different contextual features to describe this, but you need to put a human word on it just to make it understandable by everybody. I'm not saying that bonobos say join. What I'm saying is that it looks like something in this idea.
Thank you. Elodie?
Yes, yeah, thanks for the great talk, Melissa. So I had two short questions. One is the order, so you have these two calls combined together. Is the order important in which they place them? So is it always the same order? And also, do they sometimes combine more than two different types of calls?
Yes. So for the first question, yes, the order matters because what we have observed, we had collected some opposite combinations. For example, we have the, I don't know, the high hood, low hood, but if you do the low hood, high hood, it has a completely different meaning. So the order does matter. And yes, they also combine calls in longer sequences. And it's something we are actually trying to do with AI now is to see when you increase the number of calls in a combination, how does that change the meaning? But it's a big challenge.
Final question, Jonathan.
Yes, thanks very much, Melissa. So in terms of the methods, could you clarify what is the role of machine learning or AI in this type of work, and to what extent it's about maximizing the value we can get out of more traditional methods of statistical analysis?
So we have used machine learning here. I did not mention it, but basically to describe the compositionality, we have measured the distances between the calls and the combination in the semantic space. And to create this semantic space, we needed machine learning. And at the moment, we also have plans to use AI to see, because the bonobo vocalizations are very graded. So when I say this is a peep and this is a yelp, maybe it's different for the bonobo. So maybe they have different meaning within those categories. And so at the moment, we're also using AI to see, we just give it this huge data set and see whether the acoustic structure of the calls also has an influence on the meaning.
Wonderful. Thank you very much to you both. Back to you, Natasha.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much indeed, Melissa. And of course, to all of our finalists for such fascinating and thought-provoking presentations this evening. I certainly don't envy the judges having to choose between such extraordinary projects there. Well, we now have the pleasure of continuing our programme with two very special keynote presentations, one from Dr. Irene Pepperberg and Professor Offa Chernychowski, which I'm sure will add even further depth and perspective to today's discussions. But in the meantime, we warmly encourage everyone in the audience, please, to continue submitting your questions via the Q&A box, as we will be gathering these for discussions after both of those presentations. So please do continue to contribute to the conversation today. But before we move on, we do have a surprise in store, and to tell you a little bit more about that, Liad, it's over to you.
Thank you. Before we move on to our keynote presentations, I'm delighted to share a special announcement. This year, the committee has introduced an additional distinction, an award recognizing lifetime achievements in the field of animal communication. This honor is reserved for an individual whose work has profoundly shaped our understanding of animal minds, communication, and cognition, and whose influence continues to inspire generations of researchers. It is therefore my great pleasure to announce that the 2026 Coller-Dolittle Award for Lifetime Achievement is awarded to Dr. Irene Pepperberg. Irene, if you could please join us on screen, and many, many congratulations.
Thank you so very much. I am incredibly honored. And I'm going to give you a very short, obviously, in 10 minutes, viewpoint.
Before you do that, can I give you some compliments, though?
Some what?
Some compliments, because I wanted to tell the audience that your pioneering research fundamentally transformed the study of animal cognition. Through your landmark work with African grey parrots, most notably your decade-long studies with Alex, you have challenged long-standing assumptions about the boundaries of intelligence across species. Your findings demonstrated that parrots are capable of using vocalizations in meaningful ways to identify objects, colors, shapes, and numbers, and even to engage with relational concepts such as same and different. In doing so, you opened up entirely new directions in the field, reshaping how scientists think about cognition, communication, and the distribution of intelligence in the animal kingdom. Your work remains a cornerstone of modern animal cognition research, and continues to influence how we approach questions of language, learning, and minds across species. And so we are deeply honored to recognize your contributions today. And thank you again. And now, after I've embarrassed you a little bit, please, we'll be delighted to hear your talk.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to do a screen share. Come on, let's go. Okay. Share. Okay, and I want to go back one. Whoops, let's go back. Share. I'm sorry, it takes a second, of course. Slide from beginning. There we go. Okay. So can you see all this? Because mine is blocked a little bit by some of the other stuff. Okay. So again, I want to thank everybody for, who supported us financially, and for the army of undergraduates who worked with us. It's almost been 50 years since we've started this work. So legend was that King Solomon owned a ring that purportedly allowed him to communicate with all the birds and beasts of his realm. And of course, that's, apocryphal. But more recently, humans have used various techniques, sign language, plastic chips, computer systems, human speech, to actually examine real two-way communication between many primates, cetaceans, and my gray parrots. And we've used a number of different topics on this, studying it. So production and comprehension, concepts of same, different, probability studies. These are Piagetian studies, just the same studies that were given to young children, optical illusions, number concepts, again, the same types of studies that were done with young children, inference by exclusion, again, at the same level of 6 or 7-year-old children. And today I'm going to, focus on optical illusions, only because they can show us the difference between work with animals that have these communication skills and those that do not. So first, some background. Acquisition of some level of symbolic reference. Okay, originally Premack was one of the people who really looked at this in great detail. He argued early in the 80s that only primates, non-human primates, could learn some level of symbolic reference, and that it actually changed the way they processed information. And he did some incredible studies with same difference, again, showing that those that had two-way communication could process same different, whereas those without that communication could not. So his argument would, that it would be limited to our closest relatives would seem to make sense, okay? But our closest relatives are not vocal learners. And vocal learning allows a flexibility, okay, that we have in humans. It's not just the ability to learn X, okay, over time, but to be able to have the flexibility to have new types of communication systems based on new knowledge that occurs. So it's the idea that we can come up with, all the terms like bits and bytes and rams and roms for a whole new field, or silly little things like glitzy and airhead to describe different things in our society. And the most, common animals that were vocal learners, what became the Osine songbirds as well as the parrots, they were separated by humans by over 300 million years of evolution. So this is not a trivial time. So the question in my mind, having, not just read the Dr. Dolittle books, of course, but a lot of scientific research, was could parrots learn symbolic reference and then additional complex concepts? And when I began these studies in the 1970s, people absolutely did not believe this is possible. My first grant proposal literally came back asking me what I was smoking. And, you had to understand where this was coming from. I was suggesting, that something totally different. Research had been working, people had been working for about 10 years, not quite, but almost 10 years, on animals that had a close phylogenetic relationship to humans, such as the great apes, or at least large brains, such as the dolphins. Here I wanted to take a bird, again, as I mentioned, 300 million years of evolutionary separated the animals, and the brain was the size of a shelled walnut. And the little bit of research that had been done on these birds with types of techniques that, I can give you a whole long talk on why those didn't work, but really just shown them to be mindless mimic. So why did I think I was going to having doing something different? I had a different technique, which I don't have time to describe, but it's based on the work of Dietmar Toad. And I was very interested in symbolic reference, not just imitative learning. So what is symbolic reference? Well, it's only one aspect of human language, but it's critical to all else that follows. According to Deacon, it's a central problem of language origins. And it's what, people thought that separates humans from non-humans. Non-humans, they felt, again, looking at Premack's work, maybe apes could do it, but other animals absolutely could not do something like this. But once you have reference, the information content of the symbol can be manipulated independent of physical instantiation, okay? So you think about mathematical symbols, you talk about 3 blocks and 3 hearts, but then you could talk about 6 things, whichever they are, okay? You can enable abstract thought, okay? So you can mentally manipulate things in your mind without having to physically test and go through these things, okay? They don't have to be physically embodied. And to put it into a very simplistic way, your hypothesis can die, not you, while you're testing out these different types of things. So to make a very, almost 50 years of research summarized very quickly, my most famous subject, Alex, he learned labels for about 100 different objects, 7 colors and 5 shapes. He learned labels for categories. He combined these to identify about 150 different things. And he understood concepts of category, not just what was or was not green or 3-cornered, but that categories were labelable and you could put groups of objects under these things. So you had a category called color and one for shape and one for matter. And under color, you went green, blue, purple, orange, and under shape, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-cornered. And under material, paper and wood and wool and things like that. He understood concepts of same and different, not just identity versus non-identity, but to be able to understand that 2 objects could be same in one attribute and different in others, which is quite complex. He understood concepts of absence. If there was nothing same or different between anything, he said none, and he transferred that absence to the absence of numerical sets. So he understood a basic concept of zero, like not really zero the way you and I do, but a zero-like concept. He understood relative size, which is, again, very complex because you think about a tennis ball. It's big with respect to a golf ball, but it's small with respect to a basketball. Concepts of numbers to the level of a 5 or 6-year-old child. Joint attention was very important. We showed that our birds learned the same way that young children through by jointly attending to the objects as we talked about them, okay? There was a level of recursion, not the kind of linguistic recursion. This is the cat that bit the rat that ate the cheese that lived in the house that Jack built. But the idea of a recursive and conjunctive understanding where you could put 7 objects on a tray, okay, and then ask him what object is green and 3-corner, what object is blue and 3-corner, and learning to recursively go back to the questions to come up with a result, okay? His vocalizations had intention. He had phrases like, I want X and want to go Y, or X and Y were appropriate object or location labels, and they were meaningful. If he said he wanted a banana and you gave him a grape, he'd take the grape and throw it at you and go, what banana? Okay, make it very clear. There was fast mapping, not quite the same as children, but he would learn new labels and then play with these labels. So once he learned the label great, he started playing with grape, grain, chain, cane. And if we could give him objects that matched those vocalizations, they became embedded in his repertoire. He asked questions, unlike the other animals who were trained in this 2-way communication system. He would look at an object and say, what color, what shape? You tell me. So he was able to increase his vocabulary by asking us about the objects in his system. Now, what I'm going to, again, very quickly summarize is the use of symbolic reference in optical illusions. Okay, Alex knew labels for colors, and he understood questions about relative size, so we could test him on mural liar lesions exactly as a human. You show him the Brentano version of this, and you could say, what color bigger or what color smaller? Okay, and we gave him all different variations on a theme with thicker internal lines and thicker and thinner arrows, and he responded just the way you would as human. So you could look at these yourself and see which ones you see the illusion and which ones you didn't, and that's the way he responded. Okay. Likewise, we could test Griffin on occluded shapes and Kanitsa figures. Okay. So he would look at something like this, and you ask him what shape green, and he would tell you it was 4-corner. Now, there actually, if you just count corners, there are 5 corners there, but he understood that this was an occluded object. And he understood that this was that we were focusing on the object behind the circle. And again, you can see all the different variations on a theme that we gave him on this. The same for Kanitsa figures. Okay, you can see them also. So the Kanitsa figures are these objects that have like Pac-Man around them, and there's really not a triangle on that one with 3 there, but you see a triangle. And if you asked him what shape green, he would tell you 3-corner. And we would put random circles around so he wasn't just counting the black objects. However, when it came to the Ebbinghaus illusion, okay, none of our current parrots understood questions about relative size, all right? So we had to have them touch the stimulus that you would, supposedly want if you saw the illusion to provide more juice in a little cup placed in the center of these plaques that were 3D printed. So here's Athena, and you can see here that one cup looks like it has more juice than the other. However, they failed to see the illusion and chose randomly. And we think one possible reason is that they bent down to choose, the illusion was broken. So my point here is that when we have a bird that we could have just shown the object and said, what color bigger or what color smaller, that you can test them in a way you test humans. But when you lose that ability, you start having to take into account all sorts of other different things that would not be an issue otherwise. So animals that engage in various forms of interspecies communication can be studied in ways that animals that do not. Whether it changes their mental abilities the way Premack does may or may not be true, but it does change the way we can study them and examine their cognitive abilities. So just as Donald Griffin suggested in the 1970s, we can look at how they literally see the world. So I want to thank you so much, and I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions.
Indeed, we have, and this is again a good opportunity to remind those of you in the audience, if you have questions, please feel free to write them in our Q&A, and I'll be happy to present them. And maybe I'll start with a question of my own. I study consciousness, and I'm very interested in what it is like to be a human, but also what it is like to be, in this case, a parrot. And you've shown this nice dissociation between the physical stimulation and what it actually sees or perceives. So if I had to push you about animal consciousness and specifically about Alex, what would you say?
Well, there's a there. I mean, I couldn't prove it in any, specific way, but there were instances, particularly when he would go ahead of us. So we were doing a study on number concepts. He had learned, again, same, different, and saying none if nothing were same, different. I give him a tray with, different colors of sets of objects. So there were 3 purple things and 4 blue things and 6 green things. And I asked him what color 5, that was the task. So he had to, what color 3 on the tray. So he had to find the things that were 3 mixed in all above and tell me the color. By this time he was totally bored, and he would take his beak and knock everything on the floor, or he would give me all the colors that were not on the tray. So we started using jelly bellies and things that would interest him more. And finally, I get him in one day and I do this procedure and I asked him what color 3. And he looks at me and goes, and we did all different numbers, of course, but this time we did color 3. And he says 5. I'm going like, no. What color? 5. And we go back and forth a couple of times. And so I finally looked at him and I go, okay, smarty, what color 5? And he looked at me, he goes, none. There were none things on the tray. And so it wasn't just that he had, kind of jumped ahead of us and shown us that, what was going on, but he had figured out what kind of, response to give me to trigger me to ask the question that he wanted to answer. And that suggested to me, again, I can't prove, but suggested me a level of consciousness of being able to figure out what I know, what he knows how to manipulate me. That was really incredibly sophisticated. And he did that a couple of other times in his lifetime as well.
Interesting, and I'm sure that with your very close kind of acquaintance with him, that you can try to understand how he experiences the world. But you made a very interesting point towards the end about the trained responses. And of course, one criticism would be how generalizable this is to other parrots, to other animals. What would your answer be?
Well, we've been working with other birds. I mean, Griffin is very interesting. He has a much smaller repertoire than Alex did, mainly because Alex dominated him absolutely completely. So he was trying to learn things, and we'd say, and he'd start producing labels, and Alex would go, "Talk clearly, say better," and give him the answer. Or we'd ask Griffin, "What color?" And Alex would sit there and go, "No, tell me what shape." And Griffin would just sit there, answer him, answer you. I don't know what, things like that. But Griffin does this too, okay? And Athena was beginning to do this kind of work. And we work with two other gray parrots that were owned by trainers in our lab, Pepper and Franco. They have, again, a very much more limited repertoire, but they can request certain foods and things that they want and, make it clear certain things to their owners, what's important to them in their world. So we think, again, and I mean, Alex was very special in the sense that he was an only bird for 15 years.
Yeah.
He had an immense, army of people talking to him every day the way you would, a toddler. We've not been able to replicate that with our other birds. They all, Alex, as I said, was interrupting him all the time. The same thing with Athena. It was very different. So,
what do you think makes him so special? Like the Einstein.
The idea that he, I mean, in a sense, it was unfair to him that we forced him to only talk to humans. He didn't have another bird to chat with in parrot. But he realized very quickly that, this was something, if he wanted to communicate, he had to learn human speech. And he clearly, did this. And I think that's what made him special. In that
this was not done with any other parrot, like this long period
we could not, yeah, I mean, Griffin had him, and with him, Athena, she came to us with a whole repertoire of parrot stuff that she, and she would speak. But it was like, well, I can say orange. You know that I can say it. I know that you know that I know that I can say it. So why do I have to say it multiple times? I mean, it was just a different, situation. And so that's when we started spending more time on the cognitive processes than just the communicative abilities of these birds. But we have the opportunity now. One of my former students now is starting a new lab in Villanova. They're building a lab space for her where she will be able to replicate, some of this work. So we're very excited that in the next couple of years, we'll be able to hopefully replicate the kind of situation that Alex had, that we can do this again.
Well, we look forward to seeing, hearing what you'll discover. Thank you so much for
you're
the
so welcome.
talk. Thank you and congratulations.
And thank you again. I'm so honored by this.
Back to you, Natasha.
Trying to get online.
Yes.
There we go. Hopefully you can see me. I just wanted to add my congratulations, Dr. Pepperberger, for what Liad has said. Many congratulations on this truly richly deserved award. Your work has not only shaped an entire field, but also fundamentally shaped how we think about animal cognition, communication, and of course the boundaries of intelligence itself. It's been a huge privilege and deeply thought-provoking experience to hear from you today. Your career stands truly as a remarkable example of scientific curiosity, of rigor, and of course the importance of pursuing bold and sometimes unconventional questions. We really are honoured to recognise you and to celebrate your contributions here today. So thank you. Liad, back to you.
Thank you so much. And as you know, the judges are still deliberating and we are waiting to hear who would be the final winner this year. But in the meantime, we have the great pleasure of hearing from our next keynote speaker. Please join me in welcoming Professor Ofer Chernichovsky from the Department of Psychology at Hunter College, City University of New York. Professor Chernichovsky will be presenting on Decoding Animal Talk, a virtual reality system reveals how songbirds engage with virtual partners. Ofer, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Let me share screen and make sure that we have the audio also shared. Let's see if we can make it happen. Okay. So you let me know if the audio is properly shared. If not, we will fix that.
Will do. In the meantime, we see your presentation, but if you can move it to presenter's mode.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I will do that. Okay, so let's make sure that the audio works. Okay. So thank you again for inviting me. It's really fun being here. And I'm going to talk about something slightly different than what you presented, which is hybrid experiments in human and birdsong about cultural evolution. And I'm going to start by talking about constraints in arts, in human arts. Here you can see, for example, a painting by Rembrandt on the left. And you can see that Rembrandt used very few colors, only 4 colors in his palette. Later on, you can see Picasso in the blue area used only 2 colors or even only 1. And you can see a lot of self-imposed constraints that artists are doing in order to enhance their creativity. We are seeing constraints only also on the level of culture. When we talk about cultural transmission, like language in humans and birdsong that learn from each other, the transmission from one generation to the next, we are usually judge that by how well are we transferring, how similar it is. But on the macro level of evolution, every generation changes a little bit. This would be called step size. And the step size is not a random mutation. This is a parameter that determines the rate of the evolution, and it's guided by each generation. It's directional. So if you think about a culture that goes in small step, this will be a conservative culture, like high coping accuracy and low improvisation. Or you can have a culture that is more daring, that goes in large steps. And there are advantages and disadvantages to both. If you take, for example, this image and a person modifying it, you can see that that person did a small step, he respected the achievement of the previous creators and did some improvement. Whereas the next one took a really big step and makes something that I think is a little freakish. So there is a risk in doing that. So when is it useful to make small step culture or big steps culture? In songbirds, where we look at culture for many, many years, we don't control that. But in humans, we can run large experiments where we control those parameters and use those experiments to study birds. So in a funny way, we are reversing what we usually do in science. Instead of looking at animals and study animal experimentally to understand humans, we can do it the other way around. We can start from human and use the human as an animal model to understand the birds. And I'm going to show you that the step size is a very important parameter that once we understand it in human, we can play with it and understand what happened in the communication in the birds. So first of all, let me acknowledge my collaborator. The first study about the human experiment and the analysis of the birdsong. It is Nori Jacobi at Cornell, Eitan Globerson, a great musician, and Peter Harrison at Cambridge. The second one will be the more experimental part at Rockefeller University Field Research Center with Eric Jarvis and my student Catherine Alexander. So this is all started in 2019 when I took a sabbatical. I took a break from birdsong research, wanted to study some human stuff. And at that time, Nori was developing a big package for studying human behavior and human culture online in really massive experiments. I was adding to that some gaming coding. And sure enough, COVID started. But that was actually good for us because everyone was at home, so we could run a lot of experiments. Everyone was available. So let me show you one example of experiment like that. And this is a time for you to let me know if you can hear the audio or not. So here is a step synthesizers with 16 slots and 3 note types. Now, do you hear the audio?
Yes, we can hear it.
Okay, so here you can see people are playing with those notes, and it's very easy to make little tunes like that. Here is one. Maybe sounds familiar. Okay, so here is an experiment like that. Here is a random seed. This is a random melody. And now we let the first person make only small steps, only 3 steps. Second person, 3 steps. Gosh. Next. And next. So you can see people can make cute melodies like this, and they can do the same thing with images. And now we can recruit, and this can be done with a lot of people, hundreds of people online, creating in a chain, and we can see the music evolving and the images evolving. And then we can recruit other people, independent cohorts that are rating those melodies and images, and with enough people we can get stable outcomes. So here is what we get. With the images, if we allow people to change, say, only 3 pixels, then the aesthetic scores are relatively low. The more we allow them to do, the better the images are scored. That's quite obvious. We don't let them do enough, so they cannot do well. But with the melodies, we get the other way around. If we allow people to make only 3 notes change in every generation, the melodies that are evolving are rated higher. We were kind of like interested in why is it that I asked the question, like, are constraints useful or not? But in one case, it's a scaffold. In another case, it's becoming really a cage. So we try to play with different images. These are thematic images. Look at the evolution here. It started by a valley and maybe a little church in the valley. Then it's evolved into a martini glass. Then the martini glass get animated and maybe a little baby martini. And every kind of chain is very, very different. So we can look at the evolution of those chains. And we're in many, many type of canvases like this. But it really doesn't matter. Everything we're doing with images, big step win. If we unlimit it, if we let people create with freedom, it works very well. So why are we getting something so different in melodies? Well, one idea is that if you take somebody from the street and say, doodle something, they can do quite well. But if you take the same person and say, compose a melody, then they probably won't do well. So we decided to recruit good musicians, and the musician made much nicer melodies. But even with the musicians, when we made like small step chains or unlimited steps, 3 steps won. So then we tried the more complex synthesizer, same thing. So bottom line is, it seems to work, but maybe this difference that we are seeing is because even with good musicians, sometimes somebody make a bad melody that kind of like propagates through the chain and block everything from happening. So maybe it's because of damages. So we decided to do a Darwinian evolution in online experiments. So here we're recruiting a lot of people to be creators and a lot of people to be the raters. You can think about it almost like with birds, that some birds are singing, are inventing song, and other birds are judging the song, and then they couple. So here we do it with humans, where one group is the creator, the other group is the rater, and we only let highly rated melodies to go through the chain. Is that going to kill that effect of small steps? So you can see that with 3 steps, the create and rate evolution, the Darwinian evolution, give us much better melodies. That's with 3 steps. And it's true with unlimited steps, and it doesn't matter. In the end of the day, no matter what we do, 3 steps will do better, small steps will do better, unlimited is not doing well. So if you look at fitness outcome in those evolutionary experiments with human, small steps win with the melodies, large steps win with images no matter what. So you can say, okay, well, there is something domain specific here, but I don't understand what domain specific is. I really want to figure out what's going on here. So if you look more carefully, what you are seeing is that in the melodies experiment, and even with the musician, people tend to do too much. I find it many times when people are creating stuff that they are just tending to overload, to overcrowd what they do, whether it's a piece of art or a scientific paper. Sometimes less is more. And we see it very well. The optimal number of nodes in this synthesizer that has a lot of nodes is only actually 12. So if you keep it mostly empty, then you get better outcome. In fact, if you look at the number of nodes and the complexity, the entropy of the melody, and look at the entire space of melodies that the synthesizer can create, you can see that the highly rated scores, the red ones, are located in small areas. But when we're comparing it to the same size of an image canvas, we see very, very different geometry. In other words, what I'm telling you is that if you look at the creativity as a search in that space, those are very, very different terrains. And that leads us to the idea that the small steps and the large steps could be different strategies that may be optimal in different terrains. If you're navigating in a terrain that has a lot of hills and they're not connected to each other, then maybe just gambling and going to a very different location, take a train to another place will work better, make a big step. But if you are having a terrain like here, that you can actually see the top of the mountain and you can walk in small step on the route and you don't want to fall into the canyon, in this case, the small steps will work. So quantitatively, what it means is that if we have a gradient that we can climb and the gradient is kind of like narrow, small steps will do better. This is what we call negative fitness distance correlation. Namely, the more far away you are from the best melodies, the lower the scores is, and as you approach, it's gradually go better. And that's when we are actually running those experiments and looking at those ratings, that's exactly what we are seeing. What we are seeing is that with the melodies, there is a negative fitness distance correlation, there's a gradient that you can climb, and small step is the best strategy, whereas with images, it's either at the zero or the positive, and then you better off take big steps, and it doesn't really matter how we do it, we always get those results. Okay. Here is a simulation of all of that. Here you can see it actually a melody a utility space where the colors are showing you the ratings. And then we can use AI agents to search this space. And when you're running those search in the melody, we see that the small step win. Notice also that big step don't lose in the beginning. In the beginning, the big step is winning and then the small step takes over. This is in the simulation, but it's actually quite cool because in the real data, we see the same thing. In the earlier evolutionary stage, it looks as if the big steps group is winning, but as times go on, they're starting to lose. This is what we are seeing when we are looking with the images, very, very different terrain, and here big steps win both in the simulation and both in real life. So when we are looking at all of that together and try to look at the AI agent success in small and big step and look at the advantage of small steps, and look at the real numbers, the correlation is very strong. And Maestro and Globerzone even suggested doing melodies where we won't have that. And those are, as you can see, those are in the negative. And yet they are in the line and we have very, very good correlation. So it's not really a modality thing. It's all about the geometry of the search. Namely, give me utility terrain of a domain, show me how it looks like, how the landscape of the search of highly aesthetic and low-rated artifacts are, and I'll give you the optimal evolutionary step size. Now, let's finally talk about birds. Is any of that things that really in humans relates to arts and aesthetics applies also to the evolution of birdsong, which in my view is an aesthetic signal. It doesn't really have literal meaning, just like music and many other forms of arts don't have. So we started by looking at a huge database of great teats in the UK that Nilo Markel did. Those are hundreds of thousands of songs, and we have fitness data about number of siblings and also year-to-year transmission. And here we can actually calculate that gradient based on the data, and we can ask ourselves, can we actually make a prediction here? Because we know that those birds are making small steps when they imitate. Do they actually have a negative fitness distance correlation, some gradient that they can climb that explain why they are conservative? And the answer is yes. Here are the melodies and here are the birds. And no matter how we do it and what seasons we're doing it, we are seeing here that the birds have a gradient to climb, just like the case in our melodies, which means that they gain from actually imitating accurately and making a small step from there to optimize their song. In fact, when we're looking at other species like zebra finches and look at experimental data in the lab, we are seeing something very similar. We are seeing that they are very accurate, and we can directly compare that to what we found with humans. Remember the melody experiment? The 3 steps corresponds to about 80%. That's the optimum. The unlimited, that's what people practically do, which is not optimum. And you can see that that's where the birds are sitting, whereas with the images, the optimum is really far away. So is it going to tell us that birdsong is like music and not like images? I don't think it's true. I think that there are many birds maybe here. Maybe we are going to see the parrots that Irene talked about, or the California thrushes. Some birds may be much more exploratory in their vocal learning. They imitate much less. And what that brings to mind is that when we look at song culture and vocal culture in the birds, we should think about it the way we are thinking about it in humans. You're not acquiring the language because you want to sound like your parents. Nobody does. You want to use it as a starting point. And the question is how big a step you want to take. And is it true then that the birds are actually optimizing the step size in order to actually come up with the best strategy to find a good song? But the utility terrain of song is not something that we can directly estimate, which takes us to the next study, where we are trying to do that experimentally. Now here we are at the very early stages and it's very tricky, but I'm going to show you where we are. So this is a system that we developed. We call it Bird Anime. And here we are having a cage that is actually built of large monitors. So the bird is immersed in a virtual reality that is interactive. So the bird can communicate with interactive sounds and interactive animations, and we can change those parameters. We can make all of that congruent, that the sound and the animation come from the same place, or we can confuse the bird, make the animation in one direction and the sound from another direction, and so forth. And we know even from the first day we did that the congruency works very well. The birds like it to be congruent. But that's not necessarily what's going to work for us. Let me show you how it looks like. So here's our system. Here's the bird. And here's the animation. And you can see the bird is singing to the animation and interacting with it. And we're having a lot of nice outcomes. Like this is a female interacting with the animation. Notice that the female behaves differently than the male. She's kind of swishing her tail and staying close to him. She's puffing up and so forth. So let me show you a first experiment that shows you how subtle and nuanced the communication here. So this is a little pet bird that I had. Her name was Baby. And I'm introducing her to a friend, and I want you to see what happens. So you see that she's moving around. Now she's kind of like swishing her tail. But look at her beak. She's making those very, very tiny beak clapping movement. You can barely hear them. I don't know if you can hear them at all, but you can see them in the sonogram together with the calls. And Catherine Alexander and I and Eric Jarvis wanted to see if those very, very tiny interactions are meaningful for the birds. So we use our system, and the first answer was not at all. In the congruent mode, which is most effective, when we are doing the animation that include those very, very tiny beak claps, there is no difference. You see that the calls alone and the beak clap, in terms of engagement, of how much the birds approach the virtual partner, the AI partner, the activity, nothing matters. But then, when we did a confusing situation, which is incongruent, where the sound comes from one direction and the animation came from other direction, and the bird had to make decision, suddenly we could see that those tiny, tiny beak clap effect had huge outcomes in terms of the engagement and the choices. And interestingly enough, it was sex dependent. The females were very, very sensitive to those subtle cues, where males, maybe not surprisingly, were less so. Furthermore, if you remember just a few minutes ago, Julia Lee gave her wonderful talk, showed that the birds can actually discern meaning from different type of categories of calls, like hissing, which is hostile, or tat, which is communicative, nest in the when they are nesting, whine is usually when they are having sex. So when we're actually trying that, we actually, in our system, we couldn't find any difference in the initially. But then when we did incongruency, then suddenly, together with the the BCLAP kind of exposed the bird's preferences exactly according to categories that you heard from Julia Lee. So suddenly, with hissing sound, which is hostile, the bird says, I'll go to the image. With the nesting calls, maybe I'll go to the sound. And with whine, which is kind of like sex, maybe I should stay away for a while. Okay, so we got all of that. But now, can we use that in songs, which is much more difficult? And that's the last thing I want to talk to you about, how we can use AI combination with this system. And let me show you the idea here. The idea is that the first thing we want to know is what kind of combinatorial unit matters, what kind of segmentation makes sense for the birds. So here you can see an example of synthetic songs that we are making with our system, with the AI system. And then we randomly insert gaps, and we can ask the bird, how would you like the groupings to be? And so we can ask the female, can you become a composer of the song? And in this case, eventually figure out the units and then the landscape that allow us to figure out the cultural story here. And this is the AI system, the Monte Carlo Markov chain, very, very simple, old style stuff. So I'm going to end by making a little thing showing you, this is like one bird's experiment with a lot of chains at the same time, and the AI is experimenting. And the question is that in the end, it's telling us something about what the bird decided to do. So what I want you to do, I want you to listen to this song. Again, it's a random song. And I want you to think about where would you like to insert a gap, like in slot 1, 2, 3 to 8. Let's do it one more time. And now please make a decision and take your phones out and use this barcode. And let's see what's the wisdom of the crowd here. Let's see if this is going to work. Okay, very good. So the crowd is correct. The bird chose slot number 3, but it also chose number 8. So let me show you what the bird chose to do. That's how it sounds like. So you can see that this is the first step that we are using here to try to explore that space. And let me kind of like end by summarizing what I told you about. We can do those combined human bird song experiments and try to figure out in the human studies how the shape of the utility terrain predict optimal transmission strategy. We can show you that nature maximize not how well you imitate. That's to me not an interesting question, but fitness outcome, how to come up with a good song, which means that you start your search by maybe copying something, but then you start exploring for there. It's becoming a navigation in that space. And we can show you that the best way of getting high fitness is small steps in those birds. So we are doing a combination of human and bird song experiments. We can gain from both to try to figure out something that to me is very excited, trying to do cross-species, cross-modality link from something that in human that we think is very specific, like aesthetics and arts and beauty, and all those modality specific, and then to show you that we actually have a common denominator to understand the behavior across humans and animals. So I'm going to stop right here. I want to thank my collaborator, and thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Ofer. This was brilliant. We will announce the winner soon, but just one question before we do, maybe relating to the first part of your talk. I was wondering if there is a complementary explanation for the visual versus the melody results, because when you had to compose the melody, you have to do it visually. You kind of organize the notes, which is less natural than when you do it for the visual domain. And generally speaking, I would say that we are way more trained in organize or drawing or organizing features, visual features, than in organizing auditory sequences. So could it also be a matter of training?
Could be. That's why it was so important to use really trained musicians. So when we use the musicians that are really, really good at that, and they did really amazing music, so it was very easy for them to use the tool. We still found that, and again, I think that the issue with music is very, very easy to ruin. Musical space, like one bad note can ruin everything. It's much less forgiving. So the landscape, that's why I can show that it's really that if you look, and then if we change music, what I showed, I don't know if you noticed, but we can actually, Maestro Grobeson came up with synthesizers where we don't get that effect.
Yeah.
So we can definitely play with that and try to separate those, yeah.
Thank you. This was fascinating. And now thank you very much again, and we move on to the results. Natasha?
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Lead and Professor Chernychowski, for that truly fascinating presentation, a truly compelling glimpse into where this field is heading. So thank you. So we are now reaching a very exciting moment in today's programme. I'd like to invite our scientific committee to rejoin us, and of course to ask Professor Yossi Yovel to join me on screen on behalf of the panel to
So it seems like we're having some connection difficulties again. So just so you won't stay in the suspense, let me pick up from where Natasha left off and go straight to you, Professor Yossi Yovel, with the decision of the judges panel. Yossi.
Yeah, so I cannot open my camera. I think it was disabled, so maybe a guy can help me, and if not, I'll do it in the dark. Yeah, so first of all, I want to thank the committee. You can see all of the members for they've done a lot of work during this year. Yeah, all of the presentations, all of the work was really, really amazing and made life very difficult for us. We also saw a pattern. I think everyone noticed it. We switched. There's a transition from words. Last year, everybody was talking about words. This year, most presenters were talking about sentences, compositionality, etc. But still, we had to choose one winner. So the winner of the 2026 Coller-Dolittle challenge is Julia Lee for her work in zebra finches. The reasons, in brief, we think her use of AI was very, very impressive. And we were also very much impressed by the fact that she moves forward from only decoding animal communication, from detecting patterns in animal communication, to actually testing whether these patterns are important for the animals, whether they are relevant for them, and using very elegant and sophisticated ways to do so. Maybe I'll end with Jeremy's words. I think that Julia Lee is giving a voice to the voiceless. And inspired by your vision, maybe we should let the birds perform their last song once again.
Thank you so much, Yossi, and congratulations to you, Julie. What an extraordinary achievement. Please do join us on screen. Feel free to open your camera, turn it on. It is very clear that your work truly embodies the spirit of the Coller-Dolittle challenge, curiosity, innovation, and a willingness to push the boundaries of what we understand to be possible. It's been a privilege to hear about your research today, and we are genuinely excited to see where your ideas and discoveries will lead next. So on behalf of everyone here, very well done. Would you like to say some words?
Well, thank you so much. I'm really super honored. First, I mean, it was like a crazy idea to just think I would be able to go that far in that competition, and being, receiving the awards. It was really, thank you very much for this recognition of this long time work. It really means a lot to me, and I think this is, first milestone into this great endeavor to try to communicate with animals and understand better their language. So thank you for running this also. I'm really grateful for the Coller Foundation and Jeremy Coller in particular.
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Natasha?
That's absolutely wonderful. And finally, to bring today to a close, it's my huge pleasure to welcome back Yossi. So thank you and congratulations from me too. Yossi, over to you.
I'm done. I mean, unless you want me to perform the bird song, I'm willing to do
yes,
that.
Please. It would be wonderful if you did.
I'm better with bat impersonations. I think Julie is the one to do
That's
the
fantastic.
bird songs.
Well, I will then draw this to a close. I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Congratulations to Irene Pepperberg and, of course, to our winner today. It was an absolute pleasure to be part of the hosting panel. And we really hope that you've enjoyed your time with us and that we look forward to seeing you very much next year, unless Mr. Coller is online and would like to say a few words. Jeremy, are you there still?
No, I am here, but no, congratulations, Julie. Worthwhile winner.
Fantastic stuff. Well, we look forward to seeing you next year, to hearing an update on all of your research. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.